Hello, good evening, everybody.
Oh,
How is everybody?
Doing good. How about yourself there, kind sir?
Good, good. We're all good tonight. Unfortunately, Lois can't join us this evening, so she's asked me to help present part two of the Jill Dando murder and investigation that followed. So what I'll do is, for those that may have missed part one last week, I will do a quick recap of what we discussed previously, and then on to some new stuff that we have uncovered and unravelled over the last couple of months that may have caused a bit of a stir within the media world, which is quite interesting. So, without further ado, we'll get on with it. On the morning of the 26th of April in 1999, Jill Dando, who was a TV presenter for the BBC, she had been presenting a show called Crime Watch in the UK for a number of years. They would be asking for people's help to try and solve crimes that had happened around the UK. The police would be asking for help, and any witnesses or anybody that had seen what was going on was able to then contact the show, and subsequently many arrests had been made solely because of their work. 11:32 in the morning of the 26th of April, Jill Dando had left her partner's home and made it to her house in Fulham, where she was currently trying to sell the property. And as she approached her front door, the assailant had approached her, pushed her down to the floor, pressed her head into the ground, and shot her in the head. At point blank range, they pushed the gun into her head and fired. Nobody apparently had heard the shot. All they discovered was the neighbour had discovered the body that morning, and obviously the police were then called. The evidence was pointing at just a madman or a stalker had attacked her, but it had turned out that the 9mm short caliber pistol had been altered in a way in a workshop. They found the casing from the round that was used, and they discovered that this gun had been either a decommissioned gun that had been recommissioned, so it was able to fire again after it had been decommissioned, or it was just something that someone had made in a workshop to enable them to do the job. There was a number of inquiries that went out, loads of appeals, and the lines of inquiry chopped and changed. There was theories that a jealous ex-boyfriend or an unknown lover had killed her. This was quickly ruled out by the detectives, who had interviewed all of Jill Dando's friends and acquaintances and checked all the phone calls. So that was ruled out instantly. There was also a belief that somebody had hired an assassin to murder Jill Dando as revenge for them being convicted as a result of evidence brought forward on the show of Crime Watch. Again, after loads of inquiries, this was also ruled out. The possibility that a deranged fan may have killed her after she had rejected his approaches also came into question. Jill Dando's brother, Nigel, informed detectives that she had become concerned by some man pestering her in the few days before her death, but then this was ruled out after extensive inquiries. Another theory was a case of mistaken identity, which was judged unlikely given that the killing took place right on her doorstep of her own home. Normally you would, if you were going to do that, then you would obviously pick somewhere less obvious. You're not right outside their own front door. or it could have been actions taken by a professional rival or a business partner also had to be considered. Her agent, John Roseman, stated that he had been interviewed as a suspect, so he was being put in the frame by the police, thought that it could have been his responsibility that her murder had come about. A poor gentleman was then convicted of her death. George, somebody, I've got to try and find his name now. His name was George. Blimey, I've got to find it. Where are you? And this guy was arrested for her murder. There we are. After the murder, there was intense media coverage. The Metropolitan Police in London named Operation Oxborough proved fruitless after a year of investigation. Dando's status as a well-known public figure had brought her into contact with thousands of people, and she was known to millions. And there was huge speculation regarding the motive for her murder. But within 6 months after, they had spoken to more than 2,500 people, taken over 1,000 statements. The police had concentrated their attention on a man called Barry George, and he lived about half a mile from Jill Dando's house. He had a history of stalking women, sex offences, and antisocial and attention-seeking behaviour. He was then put under surveillance, and then he was arrested on the 25th of May 2000, and he was then charged with her murder 3 days later. He was tried at the Old Bailey, convicted, and on the 2nd of July 2001, he was then sentenced to life imprisonment. He had 2 appeals, which were both unsuccessful. But after discredited forensic evidence was excluded from the prosecution's case, his 3rd appeal succeeded in November 2007. So he'd spent, by this time, over 6 years in prison for something he technically didn't do, because the original conviction was quashed, and a second trial lasting 8 weeks ended with his acquittal on the 1st of August 2008. So by the time the second trial was over, he had spent 7 years in jail. After the acquittal, some newspapers published articles which appeared to suggest that he was guilty of her murder and other offences against women. And then in December 2009, he accepted a substantial damages claim from the News Group newspapers over articles in the Sun newspaper and the News of the World newspaper. And this followed a libel action in the High Court. Now, anybody that doesn't know, the News Group newspapers were the Sun newspaper, which ran from a Monday to a Saturday, and News of the World was a Sunday newspaper. News of the World no longer exists. It's now the Sun on Sunday. So all they've done is just renamed themselves. Mm-hmm. But they were sued for a substantial amount of money. So it then led to who was responsible for her murder. Now, there was, back in the time of the Serbian War, Jill Dando had upset quite a few people. In 2012, a Serbian warlord Arkan was named as a suspect in the case, alleged that he had put the hit out on Jill Dando because of her work with NATO.
Oh, really?
She had, in early 1999, the UK and NATO were involved with the Kosovo War, and that was opposing Serbia. And immediately after the Dando killing, a number of telephone calls were made to the BBC and other media outlets claiming responsibility for the killing on behalf of Serb groups. These calls stated that the murder was revenge for the NATO bombing campaign in Serbia and threatening further killings. These calls were not judged wholly credible and may have been hoaxes, but nevertheless, At George's first trial, his defence barrister Michael Mansfield had proposed that the Serbian warlord Arkan had ordered Dando's assassination in retaliation for the bombing of the RTS headquarters. Mansfield suggested that Dando's earlier presentation of an appeal for aid for the Kosovo Albanian refugees may have attracted the attention of Bosnian Serb hardliners. Dando's appeal for aid for the Kosovo Albanian refugees had been shown on television 3 weeks before her murder. In 2019, it was reported by the National Criminal Intelligence Service had been given an intelligence report to the Dando murder inquiry, claiming that the murder was in retaliation for the bombing and Arkan had ordered the killing. The report had highlighted a possible connection between the bullet used to kill Dando and bullets used in assassinations in Germany, namely handmade markings found on them. An opposition journalist, Slavko Karavisha, was assassinated outside his home in Belgrade just a few days before Jill Dando's murder, and the method used in both cases was identical. So the murder weapon was the same. In 2019, 4 men of the Serbian Secret Service were convicted of that murder. And in 2002, journalist Bob Wolfenden had advanced the view that Yugoslav Group was behind the Dando killing and, in various newspaper articles, contested all the grounds on which the police had dismissed this possibility. So there is a claim there that has probably got more evidence holding to it than anything else that they have found so far. But then comes a new piece of evidence which has been covered up for a long period of time. And it turned out that during the mid-90s, Jill Dando had been looking into things within the British Broadcasting the corporation, I suppose you can call them, but the BBC. And following the Jimmy Savile sex abuse scandal, a claim was then made that Jill Dando had been investigating a paedophile ring. And it had been the BBC had then been handed a dossier containing her findings to the management, purportedly prompting a revenge attack. The BBC had said no evidence to support the claim. But basically, she had gone and investigated what was going on behind the scenes of the BBC. She was putting her own career at risk. She was working for the BBC. So she was going behind the BBC's management's back to uncover what was going on. And obviously, once the Jimmy Savile case came through, and for those that don't know, Jimmy Savile was a high-profile TV presenter during the 70s and 80s. He presented shows such as Top of the Pops, which was current music program based on the music charts. He then went on to presenting other shows, including children's programs like Jim Will Fix It, where he helped children live dreams that they wanted. So children would write in and say, "Dear Jim, could you fix it for me to visit the Tate Art Gallery and paint a picture of the Mona Lisa," or something like that. And he would then make that wish come true for that child. And nobody knew. Everybody thought this guy was just a very charitable man. He loved children, he loved people, and he was just doing his job. Nobody ever realised what was going on behind the scenes. And it had turned out he wasn't the only person. There was a couple of other high-profile figures within the celebrity network. It wasn't just within the BBC. A lot of these celebrities worked for other TV channels as well. But as soon as that came to light, all of the other bits started coming through as well. And now, all of a sudden, this dossier that was given to the BBC about this alleged paedophile ring has now come forward. And they're all now asking the question, are the BBC responsible for Jill Dando's death? So again, a case that has gone from since 1999, since her murder. It's now still going 24 years later. They're still looking at what it could have possibly have been. Again, you've now got two lines of inquiry, two lines that need to be investigated. Unfortunately, the guy that ordered the supposed report that Arkan, the Serbian leader, had ordered her murder, has subsequently died. He died in 2000.
Wow.
So this is going to be very difficult for him to be held accountable for what was going on. So he's not going to be able to, he's not going to be able to be held accountable whatsoever. No one could put him to trial because he's dead, which is
sounds like Epstein.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, but it also asks the question, why have they kept it quiet for so long? Why have things been covered up? These things shouldn't be happening. And in this day and age, it's not something that should be happening. But we know various TV programs, various government organizations, there's always something going on somewhere in the background. And as a result, the likes of Jill Dando, who went out of her way to try and uncover such things, has paid the ultimate price. And that has ended up being the response that's happened. And it's been unfortunate. The nation lost a very much loved member of the TV community. And are we ever going to know the truth behind what had happened?
Yeah, I don't know if we ever will, because like Carrie here, for example, says she doesn't think anyone will be held responsible for Jill's death.
Yep, correct.
And then Eric said he remembered when this all happened. So unfortunately, at that time, I wouldn't have remembered myself because I was still really young at the time. So I would have known anything about it back then.
Yeah, it's just way things people cover things up to make years go by, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the problem is that although she was murdered, it was how she was murdered.
Yeah.
And to turn around and say, oh, it was just a crazed fan or it was a stalker, to me wouldn't have made sense. And I've looked at the evidence and I've said to myself, that isn't just a crazed person. A crazed person would not go out of their way to make a handgun and use it against somebody. If they were just a crazed person, they would use anything they could get their hands on, even their own bare hands, to kill their victim. But this was a purpose-made weapon to do the job it was needed. The next-door neighbour had even openly admitted he never even heard the gun go off. And a reply came back from the Metropolitan Police's investigation team saying, well, of course you wouldn't hear the gun go off because it was pressed against her head. There was no blood splatter on the evidence of her corpse. There was no blood splatter, so the murderer would not have been covered in blood because it was literally pressed against her forehead. But you would have still heard the gun go off because
I just had a quick question. Did this gun have a silencer to it, or was it just nobody could hear it?
They don't think it had a silencer on it. They think that the gun itself was a 9mm pistol, but it had been either recommissioned, so the firing pin had been removed originally, and they'd gone into the workshop and they'd recommissioned it, so they put the firing pin back in, so it was able to fire a round. But when they've recommissioned it or made this gun, it's left an imprint on the casing, and they found that casing, and that's how they've determined that it was either a reconditioned or a commissioned pistol. or a handmade pistol that's been made in a workshop, because the markings don't correspond with anything. The problem there is that even if you do fire a round off of a pistol, it's still going to make a sound,
That is
because
correct.
a
Yeah, that's what
handmade pistol is not going to be completely soundproof.
That is correct.
Even a 9mm can make a sound. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Even you know, the sniper rifles, they still make a sound.
Well, those are
But
loud, I heard. I mean, they
are
definitely
very
do
loud.
make a sound. Yeah, they're
But
really loud.
when you're firing a sniper rifle from a distance, the person that you're aiming that rifle at is not going to know that rifle's been shot until they're already dead.
Right.
You're not going to
You
hear it.
never even see it coming.
Yeah, you'd be dead before you heard the gunshot. So, you know, that just sort of puts into perspective how it doesn't make any difference if you have a silencer on a gun. There will still be some sound made. The silencer just quietens it. And this is what's happened in this case. The gun was pressed against the head, so a head would have acted as the silencer. So the round wouldn't have made much of a noise, but there would have still been some form of sound from the ignition of the round. But the neighbour never heard it. So whether he had the radio on or there was a lot of noise in his home when he heard when it happened is another question altogether. Because even a hand pistol still makes quite a bit of noise. And then who would go to the extent a crazed killer or a stalker? Why would they go out of their way to try and obtain a silencer to put on the end of their gun to kill someone that they've been stalking?
Right.
You know, if I was to put myself in a stalker's shoes or a murderer's shoes, the last thing I would want to do is do it in broad daylight and out in the open.
Yeah, that's kind of what's really unusual, because I've heard of a few other crimes like that where some of these crazy people out there, most people usually would say that, but there's just some of them out there that just doesn't care, you know, when exactly they're going to commit such a murder. They don't always wait to the cover of darkness to do it. They'll sometimes just do it in broad daylight. Yeah.
But the thing is somebody that, if you put yourself in the shoes of a stalker or somebody that just wants to go out and kill someone for the sake of doing it, you're going to just do it.
Right.
You'd go out in broad daylight. You'd do it out in front of people. You're not really that bothered. If you're a hitman, you've been paid to do it. But you're not going to cash in on that unless you get away with it.
Right.
So you're going to do whatever you can to make sure you get away with it. So you would use darkness. You may force her back into a house and then assassinate her inside the house where nobody can see, nobody can hear. You can do it as silent as anything, and you're likely then to get out without being seen and escape. Then you can spend the money that you've just earned from that contract. That to me makes more sense. So unless you're, if you've been paid to put a contract on someone and you've gone out there, again, you wouldn't just walk up to them in broad daylight. You would use a sniper rifle with a silencer on it and take a shot from a distance. You've got more of a chance to escape than you have if you go right up to her, you pin her to the floor and then shoot her in the head. By the time you've got down the bottom of her footpath, there could be half a dozen people on you. No chance of escaping then. Too many people about.
Because you know, it's just that like I said, there's just certain individuals who will really try to plan this out exactly, like, you know, again, even aside from some of those exceptions, there's really you always have a certain individual out there who will try to, I guess, essentially plan out exactly when is the best time to commit this murder or assassination. Like, do it when most people would very least expect it, because it's just I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that such individuals will plan something like this, but they'll do basically by whatever means necessary to get what they want.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at her work on Crime Watch, I can't remember the figures. I mentioned them last week.
And yeah, Eric says here what he thinks it was deliberate that way to confuse people.
Yeah.
Allison?
I'm sure I've got the numbers here. I mentioned it last week, but there was quite a number of arrests made as a result of the series of Crime Watch, which she presented. And there were quite a few. I think there was something like 200 odd convictions.
Really? 200? Wow.
That led from the show. The show itself would center around, I think it was about 4 or 5 cases per episode. And literally each episode was, we need your help with this crime. And there'd be recreations, or there'd be statements from people that were there regards to what had happened. And then they would give the phone number for people to contact who may have witnessed something. And as a result, arrests were made and convictions were actually made. So they actually did a good job. But then shortly after that, they put the appeal out about Jill Dando's case. Crime Watch was never the same after that, and it stopped. Which, in a way, I think was a sad thing, because it was doing something for the public, which the BBC don't really do anymore. But it has left a lasting footprint. And the legacy that's happened as a result of this, there has been an institute. It was her co-presenter, Nick Ross. He had then proposed a formation of an academic institute in her name. And together with her fiance, Alan Farthing, they raised £1.5 million. And the Jill Dando Institute of Crime Science was founded at the University College in London on the 26th of April 2001, the second anniversary of her murder. A memorial garden was also designed and realised by the BBC television ground force. And that was another BBC TV programme where they went round to people's houses and they completely redesigned their gardens. And with some quite funny episodes, but some really wonderful gardens as a result. And they used plants and colours that were special to her. And that's located in Grove Park in Weston-super-Mare. And that was opened on the 2nd of August 2001. The BBC also set up a bursary award in her memory, which enables one student a year to study broadcasting journalism at the University College of Falmouth. And Sophie Long, who was then a postgraduate who had grown up in Weston-super-Mare, she is now a presenter on BBC News and gained the first award back in 2000. So there's been a lot of things that have happened. In 2007, Weston College opened a university campus on the site of her, the former Broadoak Sixth Form Centre, where Jill Dando studied. The Sixth Form building has been dedicated to her and is named the Jill Dando Centre. So her legacy has carried on. The work she did is still there. Even though she may not physically be here, the memory of her is here, and the work that she did has remained. Very similar to a lot of high-profile people. Like if you look at Princess Diana, you know, the good that she did, she'll always be remembered as a result of what good she did. Right. And Jill Dando pulled in the same sort of, being formed in the same press as such.
You make a good point there, Allison. Yeah. She lives on, even though she's gone.
Yeah.
Right.
A bit difficult, really, because there isn't much else going with that. Just the fact that now that the investigation is now still ongoing. Are they ever going to find anybody? It's going to be difficult after all this time. Anybody that could be responsible for it could quite possibly have already died.
That's exactly what I was kind of thinking, considering it's now been almost 25 years. That, and we see this with a lot of these, unknown murder cases, like when they can never find the primary suspect after a considerable amount of time. Even if 25 years is still not that too long, you kind of have to think to yourself, well, who it could have been and how old that person could have been back then. Like if it was, say, for example, if it was like someone in his mid 30s or so back 25 years ago, we're talking about a guy who's almost now close to his 60s at this point.
Yeah.
I'm not good with math, but he's a lot older now, and there's a likely chance that person could have passed away from anything. So
yeah, exactly. He could have, the murderer could have caught cancer. Two days later, he could have been diagnosed with cancer, or
could have been murdered.
He could have been murdered himself.
Suicide.
He could have died in a car crash,
and that's kind of,
or anything.
And I can even put in another example, although this is more the style of a serial killer. If you even look at something like, and surely yes, so much time, half a century has gone by. Like if you look at something like, for example, the Zodiac killer, who committed murders in the 60s and 70s, and they never found out who it was. There were suspects, but they just didn't have the evidence that they were looking for. Considering now over half the century has passed, that person, the Zodiac killer, whoever he was, he may have been a young person himself. He may have been like even in his early 20s, but half a century later, that would put the guy like now in his 70s. So they say the same thing. By now, especially, even if he was young back then, most likely a chance that guy is dead as well.
Yeah, and you could flip it the other way. If he was in his 40s or 50s then,
that too. He could have been
he's
older.
Definitely going to be dead.
Right.
Long gone.
Right.
And it's like with the Jimmy Savile case, nothing came to light until after he died. Too late to do anything then. You can't convict somebody who has already died.
Right, exactly.
What can you do?
There's another example, and this was actually something that happened recently, about 10 years ago, again, of another unsolved murder case. And they thought they had the right person. Almost now, now over 55 years ago, there was a unknown murder that occurred in the eastern part of the state of Illinois, not really in the Chicago area, but more in Sycamore, Illinois. That's where it was. And sorry, I thought I heard someone calling.
No, that's right. It's my partner's iPad going off.
But there was a murder, basically of a 7-year-old girl, and it was a brutal case. And that was back in 1957. And you think, again, considering how many years have gone by, you would think that too, considering this occurred back in the 50s, that this person probably would be dead too. But at one point, they did come across somebody who was still alive, who actually was a former police officer back in the early 80s. And it turned out he did live in the area back in 1957. He was kind of a troublemaker, but not like a huge offender. But somehow they found some kind of DNA and they linked to him for this murder. And at this point, this guy was in his 70s. And they really, truly believe they finally found the person, even though 6 decades have gone by since this poor kid was killed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the triumph would be short-lived, because after more DNA testing and whatever else they could find revolving around this case, because even today there are still family members of this kid that was this murdered kid who are still alive today.
Yep.
And they later found out that turned out it was not him. They thought it was. He did live in the area back in 1957, but he was not necessarily at the scene of the murder when it occurred, even though he was kind of at that time, he was only like 17. But after a few years, the charges were dropped and he was released from prison because they found out he was not the guy. So once again, this does revolve around the case that most likely whoever her true murderer is probably long dead. And again, could have been older too. So probably, I mean, family members may not have that closure, but the sad part is, we'll probably never find out.
Yeah. And in the case of Jill Dando, her murderer or her alleged murderer has spent considerable amount of time in prison for murdering her. And then it's turned out that because of the evidence that was either not submitted or the wrong evidence was submitted, he was then given freedom.
Right.
He has spent so many years in jail. He's been proved to be innocent after being proved to be guilty after 7 years. And this poor guy now has got to try and live a life after being accused of murder, spending 7 years in jail, and then being released. So he is then going to look for compensation. This is going to cost money. He then sues the newspapers for the allegations made against him. So he's then got more money, but he's still got to live a life where people will stand there and say, you killed Jill Dando.
Yeah, you're always going to have people out there, unfortunately, that even if the proof is there saying that, you didn't do this, they're still going to either believe you or give you that funny look or uncomfortable look. They think, because there's going to be people out there who say, oh, they're just only showing just because of this or that. And there's going to be people out there who will say, this person did it and he got away with it. So it's unfortunate, that even with what we have today, as far as technology and whatnot, to prove that, certain individuals may have not committed this murder at all. Unfortunately, it's just like anything else. You're going to have your skeptics out there who are not convinced.
Yeah. And you've got, obviously there will be a lot of cold case files out there simply because they will accuse somebody. They may imprison that person. That person then is found not to be guilty because of evidence that either wasn't used or new evidence has turned up that proves it wasn't them. They've then gone, I want compensation. They've then got to live a life where they can sue likes of newspapers. They then move on to their life and they get on with it. But the problem then is the people that were behind the investigation have spent thousands and thousands of pounds investigating this case and not getting anywhere. Right. And then they just go, we're not getting anywhere. We're going to have to cold case this.
Well, you also have to look at too how the evidence is handled and what evidence is tossed out of court, because how the chain of evidence is handled in the custody. Yep. And a lot of people, don't even look at the account of that as well. And that can show a person is guilty, and that is withdrawn in a case. Yeah. And it's not using against that person. And now that person is proven guilty or innocent, and they're actually guilty.
Yeah. Right. And in some cases, it's down to the corruption that is within the judicial system.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's if I give you $10,000, can you hide this bit of evidence? Oh dear, that evidence has just disappeared. I'm going off to Hawaii on holiday. See you later. So we all know that there is corruption there on different levels. So with this, like you say, this lady has been murdered in broad daylight, in cold blood, and no one has seen or heard anything. All they know is she received a single shot to the head, which killed her instantly. That was it. They arrested the wrong person. They proved the evidence was tainted and it was discredited forensic evidence. And as a result, he then gets released.
Right. And Samantha,
so he then gets to move on, but they're still no closer to finding out who it was that killed her in the first place.
Exactly. And again, that's what's kind of unfortunate when it comes to these cold cases out there. It's just that there's this constant almost stress about, because you're just so determined of wanting to know who it really was. And I don't really, I mean, at least for me, I don't think it really ever goes away, especially for those who are working on the case.
And I think as well for friends and family of the victim, you know, they're ever going to be thinking about what happened, who it was that did it, why it happened. You know, those questions are going to be forever going through their minds as to why she was murdered. Definitely. And it will be more poignant to them on the anniversary of her death and the likes of her birthday. You know, specific dates within the timeline that would be significant to her friends and family would be saying, why hasn't anybody been caught for this?
Exactly.
Well, not only that, can you imagine their family members what about me? You know, thinking about looking over their shoulders and worrying about themselves. You know, what if?
I was going to say real quick, Grizzly, because just respond to Rita.
Yeah, that was my little tiny. That's my little sidekick. So.
This is my opinion. They made a case to convict Barry George.
Yeah, they were under pressure. A high profile celebrity has been murdered. They had to find someone responsible, and this guy, as far as they were concerned, they looked at his criminal record and gone, "Do you know what? This guy fits the bill.
Right.
He lives nearby. He's got a history of infatuations with women, so let's pin it on him."
Well, and you know, there was one other comment. This is something that, you know, when it comes to these cases that some people often never really think about, even in this day and age, is that when it comes to like trying to identify who exactly, you know, in this case killed Jill, or, you know, many of these other cold cases, you can't carry what one point also says, you can't rule out a woman too. You know, it's like sometimes law enforcement agencies, and when it comes to these unsolved murders, it's not always committed by a male. Every once in a while you'll get a woman involved. And that's one of the difficulties, where sometimes they turn a blind eye. They think, oh, this is definitely a guy. This guy did it. It has to be. You know, no woman would have the capacity to do something like that. When unfortunately the reality is that that's exactly what Samantha just said. Women are worse. They are the scariest killers.
Yeah.
You know, they have a much bigger advantage than male killers do.
And the thing was, Jill Dando was engaged to be married to her then boyfriend, Alan Farthing. Now, could it have been one of his ex-girlfriends?
Yeah, like a jealous girlfriend
or
admirer.
She didn't like the fact that Jill Dando was now dating her ex.
Right.
Could she have taken it? Now, for a woman to point a gun at another woman's head, it would be more understandable than a hitman, because what else would, you know, I'm not being sexist, but I think a woman would be more likely to walk up to her in broad daylight and go, "Do you know what? I hate you, bitch." Bang.
Yeah. It's probably, in my opinion, I heard this at one time, and this actually kind of goes along with what Samantha just said. I mean, to me, that's probably also far more frightening than what a male could do as a woman, because they might do something like that completely without hesitation. You know, they'll just go right at it than what a man could do.
I mean, I personally think that if I was to put myself into a murderer's shoes, if I was to say to myself, right, I'm going to kill somebody, I certainly wouldn't be doing it in broad daylight.
Yeah.
Not in front of where people can see. If I all of a sudden just went absolutely nuts and said, right, I'm going to go out and kill someone, I wouldn't do it in broad daylight. I would want to try and get away with it if I could. So I would be doing it at night time or behind closed doors where no one's going to witness it.
Well, to also throw into this, because again, I can throw out another example. You know, like in this case, if this was a woman who committed a murder, I mean, and believe it or not, I'm sure some of you guys probably this was a very recent case. I mean, in this case, they did find out who it was. It didn't take long, but I'm sure some of you guys remember from last year. And this occurred in my area, Chillingly. If you guys remember, there was that shooting that occurred in Highland Park last year, which Highland Park, that's just like 20 minutes away from me. That occurred during that 4th of July celebration. And the guy who committed this, which again, this was in broad daylight, he shot from a rooftop. But the weirdest thing was he was dressed up as a woman. And I think he was using that again to his advantage point to think, well, they're going to think I'm a woman, so that therefore I'm not going to get caught. And then as soon after he completed with what he was doing, he ran down the stairs, took off his disguise, and ran with the crowd to make it look like he was among those that was fleeing the area, evacuating. Of course, it didn't take long for the police to find out it was really a guy. Yeah. But it's crazy to think that there's people who, again, when it comes to women committing these kind of murders or crimes, that some guys will also use that to their own advantage, thinking that they'll be able to get off easily and will never be caught if they disguise themselves.
That's true. I can see that.
Well, yeah. I mean, he was up on a roof.
He was up on a roof, and he was dressed up in women's clothes. I mean, he wasn't like actually like personally, but no, he was dressed up to disguise himself and make him look like he was a completely different person.
And he also thought he got away with it, because I've just read up on it.
When that came up in the news, I mean, none of us went to go see fireworks that day. I mean, that was a terrible 4th of July celebration, but I'm just glad that they were able to catch that guy.
Yeah, his name was Robert Eugene Crimo III, or Crimo III, and he was actually apprehended 8 hours after the shooting.
Yeah, he was. It's scared the hell out of us. I can tell you that, right? And what's even more unsettling about this, and I don't know if I ever told you guys about this, my friend Don, who does the show Fear Fans on Tuesday nights here on this network, I was hanging out with him, and we were actually at Highland Park just the day before the shooting, and we realized then that had we been there a day later, or had the shooting occurred the day before, there would have probably been a likely chance we would have been shot and possibly even killed.
Yeah.
So,
oh, wow.
Thinking about it now, it was truly chilling just knowing that we weren't really necessarily in the downtown area. We were kind of on the edges of Highland Park, but it was still close to that proximity. So it was, like I said, it was truly chilling when we found out exactly where it was.
And for that as well would also could have quite possibly brought back memories of the Brown's Chicken Massacre.
Yeah, and that's not far from me either. So, I think that's about 10, 15 minutes away from me.
And that is one of the 2 deadliest mass shootings in Illinois history.
Yeah, it is.
Both shootings killed 7 people, and although there was only a few years gap between them, there would have been some memory from some of the people that would have gone, this happened 8 years ago.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, and because when we had the 4th of July celebration this year, we were on constant guard, because it definitely brought back, considering it happened a year ago, but we later found out, of course, too, that it wasn't just us, obviously, just in the Chicago area and throughout the state of Illinois. I think that shooting, because it drew a lot of national attention, everybody throughout the country was kind of on guard, because we really didn't know if something like this was going to happen next, and if somebody out there was going to build a similar type of plan to this. So this once again kind of goes back to what we're talking about, people coming up with some kind of solution to commit such assassinations or murders, to basically commit it and then try to get off scot-free.
Yeah, and it's like you say about the fear that it spreads. Something like a mass shooting is something that gets widespread regardless. And we've had it over here. Obviously, when we had the IRA, when they were active and they were bombing places, the problem we had here in Colchester, in Essex, we had a big garrison here. and we actually had the IRA detonated a bomb within the married quarters of the garrison.
Right.
I think it was a sergeant got in his car, turned his engine on, the car blew up.
Oh,
and it was claimed by them. And being fairly young at the time, scared the living daylights out of everybody. We didn't want to go into town because there was constantly phone calls to the police saying that there was a package left outside McDonald's on the high street. You know, you didn't want to go anywhere because of what had happened. And then you had the bombings in Soho in London. Again, it was fearful for a lot of people. But then all of a sudden there was this, what they called the British true grit spirit came out. And everybody just turned around and said, you're not stopping me from going to somewhere I love going to. And things carried on regardless.
Right.
We were a little bit more observant. We kept our ears to the ground a lot more. And it sort of continued. And every once in a while, something would happen that would sort of make us realise that we are still vulnerable regardless. You know, anything could happen at any time. So you have to remain vigilant.
You do.
But
you really
right.
do.
And the problem is these are people that have been getting away with it for a long period of time.
Well, and even to this day, I just looked this up. I mean, even with what I just brought up about the Highland Park shooting, because I know some people are probably asking, even as of right now, the shooter, he's never offered an explanation to why he's committed it. So it's not also just the murders, you know, such murders like this. You also kind of really want to know exactly what's the reason or motive behind it. And there's just times that, once again, very much like when we're trying to find the right suspects, sometimes you can just never find out exactly what the motive was for such a gruesome crime.
Yeah, you want to try to understand, you know, the understanding behind, you know, the actions.
Yeah, because, you know, you don't wake up in the morning and have like a family member or friend die right in front of you when you go to work or you go out every day. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and it's weird to actually sort of look at it and go, right, okay, he has been found guilty of killing these people. What I do not understand is he was charged with 21 counts of first-degree murder. What I'm confused with is, how can you kill somebody 3 times? 3 sevens make 21.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If he killed 7 people, how did he kill them 3 times?
It doesn't make sense, because, like, if you look at also, and this is also more from a death penalty standard, like if you look at, for example, you know, some of these people out there who've committed such crimes and in states that have the death penalty, like obviously for you, Grizzly, you know, Kentucky, I know you guys have the death penalty there. Sometimes even the fear of death doesn't even bother some of these murderers. They might say, okay, you're going to kill me. Okay, well, and they try to get smart sometimes. They say, for example, if we execute you, he might say, you can only kill me once. I kill, like, let's say 20 people. You can't kill me 20 times. So it's kind of bizarre, you know, how some people say that they were able to kill someone 3 times when the reality is you can only kill them once.
I think the best thing for that is when in his situation, if you get given the death penalty and you've killed a number of people, they should just turn around and say, okay, we're giving you the slow death penalty.
Yeah.
Make you suffer the way you made them suffer.
Right.
The death penalty is still the same.
And, you know, and honestly, that's, even though we don't have it here in Illinois, at least for us, you know, like in the case with the school shooter that we had, we think it's kind of the best way for like a slow death penalty. Because when I found out that they finally caught him, you know, this guy thought he was going to get away by dressing up as a woman, and that they were going to suspect a woman in this case. When I heard that they caught him, I said exactly what I was. I mean, it's kind of something that is quite familiar, but when I told my friends I had that he was caught, saying that they were going to be taking him to a maximum security facility where he's going to stay till the day he dies for his crimes.
Yeah.
And honestly, even though we don't have the death penalty, we think it was actually the most appropriate way, because if you think about it too, you got all these inmates around and they're going to go after you for that kind of crime. So it's a death penalty in itself, even if we don't have it.
Yeah, because you're locked behind bars until you're dead, basically.
It is, and it's again, it's like a death penalty in itself, because you're getting the slow death penalty. You're going to be stuck there with all these other bad inmates with who knows what they've done, who are probably, kind of the top ranking, if you will, and you're never going to see the light of day again, for that matter.
And I think as well, it's the fact that he's managed to think that by dressing up as a woman, he was going to get away. A lot of mass shootings, 9 times out of 10, you see it in the news. These people have gone out with an automatic rifle and shot at hundreds of people and only killed, say, 7. Exactly. 9 times out of 10, you expect it to be death by cop. You expect that person to get shot in the action of killing these people. He managed to last 8 hours before they arrested him.
Well, and that's the other thing, too, if you think about it, because you just brought up something else, and this goes also back to the Jill Dando. Even if it wasn't a woman, how do we not know it could have been, a police officer, him or herself, or someone involved in law enforcement, and was able to successfully cover his or her own tracks and try to blame it on an innocent person, because there have been a few cases like that over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that particular case, you've got 7 people that have killed. He's used an automatic rifle, and he was on top of a roof. So you would have thought the second the first shot was heard, you'd be like, whoa, where's that coming from?
Right.
The second shot, you'd be trying to locate where it's coming from. So if each shot was a kill, that would have only been 2 people killed before you'd been able to pinpoint where the shot was coming from.
Right. Now,
so by the time he's managed to let off a few more rounds, there should have been people surrounding the building. Okay, you've got a parade going on at the same time, but you would still eventually have been able to have pinpointed where he was coming from, and you'd be sitting at the bottom of the building waiting for him to come out.
Right.
Yeah.
See, now,
not managed to leave it 8 hours before finally apprehending him.
Right. See, now Samantha is asking, could that be that they are sentencing him as if he killed them a number of times based on how horrific it was? I know different states have different rules and and requirements for that. There are times that some crimes are just so grim that's why sometimes it's not even exactly like how they may have killed them. Sometimes the crimes are just so horrific that's why this certain individual's on death row instead of life imprisonment.
I mean, he also got charged with 48 counts of attempted murder.
Right.
And 48 counts
he had so many charges to him, yeah.
Yeah, 48 counts of aggravated battery. So he only injured...
How many people was in the area, probably?
He only injured 48 people, and yet it was 48 attempted murder and 48 aggravated battery. So those 2 charges were on the same people.
Yep.
Each individual that was injured had an attempted murder and an aggravated battery.
And that does make sense.
Yes. And that makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you get the 21 counts of first-degree murder when he only killed 7 people.
Right.
How does that work?
Honestly, I wish I knew the answer myself on it.
If I was him, I'd have been sitting in the court going, hang on a minute, but I only killed 7 people. Why am I being charged with 21 deaths?
Right. Now, Carrier says, I live in a town where serial killer Levi Belfield worked, and I used to go there a lot around the time he worked, and I class myself class lucky as I was Bognor Regis. I don't know how to say that part.
Yeah, Bognor Regis, you got it right.
Okay, Bognor Regis town, 10 minutes before the IRA bomb went off. Really?
This was the thing. The IRA didn't care where they let the bombs off. They would let them off in random places. But places like Colchester, where you've got a garrison, you've got the city centre itself, and the garrison is just on the edge of the city centre. But a lot of families within the military garrison don't live within the garrison. They live in estates around the town itself. Exactly. So they became targets. And so the IRA were quite happy to just put a box outside a McDonald's restaurant in the high street and then make a call and say, we've put something outside McDonald's. Next minute, you know, high street's been cordoned off. Everybody's panicking and running for their lives, thinking there's going to be a bomb go off.
Right.
But they did it wherever they felt like it. It wasn't specific targets. They just did it to terrorize people. And it worked in a lot of places.
It's similar to when they say that you will be sentenced to 100 years and you think, but the person's 60.
So the reason why they do that, when a person's sentenced to 240 years, right? So the reason why they do that, if they go to the Supreme Court and they drop off so many years off their sentence, they still have those years to back it up. So they're still in prison. So if they get off extra charges, they still have charges on them.
Right.
So that's why there's extra years. So that's why there's 200 years, 240 years, and so forth.
Yeah.
So there's no way they can get out of prison.
Yeah. So even if they like, you made a good point. So like, let's say again, like you said, 200 years, and they say, well, we're going to commute part of it to just 100 years. You still got to be there for those 100 years. So you're still not going to get out.
Right. So we're like, we've sentenced you to 240 years in prison. You've been a good boy for the last couple of years. You've given us so much help with other investigations. We'll knock 100 years off your sentence.
But you're still not getting out.
It's not going to make any difference. You're still in jail, sunshine.
Yeah. You know? It's the Eric's like life sentences used to be 15 years, so you can get 3 consecutive life sentences. And that's the other thing, too, if you think about it. Even if, let's say basically that you're getting a life sentence of, they just say like 25 years. They're saying consecutively. So even if you complete one term, then you got to complete the next one, and then the next one after that. So it's another.
Correct. Yeah, that's why they say they run concurrent.
Life imprisonment. Yeah, you're still alive regardless.
A lot of judicial systems are really strange because they say to run concurrently.
Right.
So in the case of the Highland Park Parade shooting, you know, if he gets sentenced to so many years and they say to run concurrently, all of those life sentences would then run at the same time.
They do, exactly.
And you think, well, hang on a minute. And if over here it used to be, there seems to be a lot of judges now over here that are saying life means life, whereas before life meant 25 years. So if you were to run those first-degree murders as life imprisonment to run concurrently, you'd only be in jail for 25 years and then be out.
Right, exactly. But Samantha, yeah, it basically is. I mean, there have been a few cases, and I know I'm referencing more of a movie, but honestly, it has happened in a few occasions where some people are sentenced to life in prison. And if they were really young at the time, they might spend more than half of their life in prison. Like they could, because there are inmates who have literally spent like 50 years in prison and are still alive today. And they sometimes will think, well, this person, you know, has been here for a while. He's older now. He knows what he realizes what he's done. We don't think he's a threat to society. And sometimes they will be released, but that's only for certain individuals. Most times they usually will never get out. But even if you show good behavior in prison, the only thing that, you know, even if you're never still going to get out of prison, the only thing that really the state can really do, at least for us, is that they may transfer you to a lesser facility, you know, which may not have as many restrictions, but you're still locked up regardless. You're still not.
Yeah, it's less security.
Yeah.
I mean, we have more sort of like the open prisons. We've got the worst of the worst prisons where they are locked up and they haven't got the privileges that you would have expected them to have. But then as you go further down the prison system, the prisons are more open and you can have day release prisons where they will still be locked up at night, but once a week they're allowed to go out and they work in places like libraries or work in the laundry section of a hospital or somewhere like that, and then they have to report back to the prison at a certain time. And you're like, hang on a minute, that's not punishment. You look at a lot of these really lax prisons, and they've got TVs, microwaves, PlayStation 5s.
A college dorm.
All the mod cons. You know,
it's like a college dorm.
It's being a holiday destination for some of these criminals, because they know they'll get put in these cushy little cells with all the mod cons, and they don't have to pay for it.
Right. Well, actually, I could probably relate to that. I mean, not necessarily to those kind of things, but as you guys saw, when I know it's going to sound unrelated at first, but when I was at that trip to Colorado with Jeremy and the others, on the way back, we happened to pass by like one of those kind of vans almost, and there was something to the side of the van, and I looked over to my right, because we were in Iowa, and it said Iowa Department of Corrections, and you could see the inmates inside, and it kind of got you thinking, like, geez, what did these guys do? But it's kind of the same thing too. You know, these guys are now outside prison walls, but I'm only hoping that they were only going out to actually work, because, you know, unfortunately, reality is, you know, some of these inmates still have to work regardless, because you know, that's the other thing too when it comes to the prison system. When these inmates come in, they think that they're also getting a free place and stuff, when reality is that's not really the case. It costs money to even be in a prison cell. You know, nothing's for free. You could say too that, and you could say too, well, I'm not going to pay for it. That's fine. They don't have to pay for it, but they would have to know that their jail will not be, I guess, for lack of a better term, the richest jail or whatever. By not taking that money,
they've got to be self-sufficient, and so they would have to sit there and they would have to work. So they'd have the people working in the kitchens, working in the laundry, and maybe working out in like a garden allotment where they'd be growing crops and things. And I don't know whether they still have that sort of system in the States now, but you used to get like the chain gangs where they used to go out and they used to help build the mounds for railroads.
I don't know if
and cleaning ditches and things.
I don't know if they still do that kind of. I mean, I know they still chain them up, but they don't do it like the old-fashioned way, like they used to over 100 years ago. At least as far as I know. But that's
why I said like the chain gangs.
Yeah, they do something similar like that today. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like when they come into. I mean, it varies from state to state, but it's like one thing that's often certain in most prison facilities, and I'm not just talking about my state, I'm talking about the prison system as a whole for the country, but they usually will tell them quickly that once they come into these jail or prison facilities, they're not only going to just sit in their cells, they will be put on a work schedule, or they'll be ordered really to do whatever means necessary, what work needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, we used to have a system here. It used to be called NACRO, and it was for people that had been charged for crime, but wasn't deemed to be a crime worthy of being put inside prison. So they would then work within the community, and they would have these groups go out. And we've got one, an area down here where I live. We've got a river that runs straight past our town and goes into Colchester city itself. And we had an old river path that used to go all the way along the river into Colchester. They actually got this NACRO team to come in and resurface and redo this entire footpath. So it was all properly done. And they literally leveled it all out. They'd got it all nice and the right sizes. They'd laid weed cloth down to stop weeds from going through. They put all the stones down, and then they smoothed it over so that bicycles could use it. And this path is about 3 or 4 miles long. And it was all made by these people that were working on community service. But while they were there, they had to wear fluorescent vests with NACRO written on the back, NACRO.
Right. Okay.
And that let people know that they were working in the community, doing community service. because they committed a crime. And then all of a sudden, the PC brigade or the do-gooders, the millennials, all turned around and went, oh, that's victimizing them because they committed a crime. That's so wrong. So what did they do? Stopped it. Oh, you can't have that. That's embarrassing for them poor sods. And we're like, hang on a minute. They shouldn't have committed the crime in the first place. They are doing something for the community, for doing something bad to the community in the first place. So what if they're recognized as a criminal? That's their fault for doing the crime in the first place.
I agree. Right. If you're behind bars, I think your ass should be in chains. I think you should be on the side of the road picking up trash. I think you should be cutting the weeds with weed eaters. Yep. I think you should be maintaining the roads. I'm sorry. I just think that's the way I feel.
Well, and I actually do agree with you on that too, because considering what they have done and what that's why I said before, it's like they won't be just sitting in their cells; they will be put on a work schedule for that matter. And even if and I think we all know too, even if these inmates do make some kind of money out of it, the salary is certainly far less than what you would get at a legitimate in a legitimate job. Because, for example, I remember hearing one time where one of those inmates was kind of one of those parts of those crews, like cleaning up trash, cutting weeds. The entire time that he was, each hour that he had worked, the amount of money he received was just 25 cents an hour. That's all. Yeah. That's your pay salary right there, and that's it. They don't give you a full dollar.
Well, in the United States, I don't know if they still do it, but certain states, they used to make license plates in the state penitentiaries.
Up here, I think most of our license plates are still being made by the prison system here.
So, yeah,
they come, which most people don't seem to know. Most of our license plates come from a lot of these prisons. They're made by inmate labor.
I mean, the community service over here, if you commit an act, commit a crime here, and you are given, say, for instance, 50 hours community service, you then have to work with an organization that the court sends you to. You then have to do your 50 hours with that organization. You don't get paid for it. It comes out of your own pocket. You have to get to these places to do those hours. You might be given a lunch and you might be given something to drink by the organization.
Yeah.
But with regards to work hours, if you work for them for 8 hours, you're not getting 8 hours worth of wages. You're doing it for absolutely nothing, because that's the crime that you've been made responsible for.
That's your punishment, basically.
So these people that commit a crime and only get given community service is the right thing. They should give back to the community that they have taken from in the first place.
See, and I'm actually surprised. I've talked about this on another episode, and I'm not going to reveal the person's name, understandably, but I'm really surprised that didn't happen to someone that I actually knew, because now I know I told Lois about it before, but we actually had somebody who used to be a friend of mine. He committed not only just a serious crime, this was actually a federal crime. Again, I'm not going to say exactly who it is, because I think it's, to be respectful, surprisingly, even though he is even though he's still causing problems to this very day. But back in 2010, which I was still in high school at that time, he actually gave a bomb threats to our school, as well as another one, and it was all for a very stupid reason. Hang on 1 second. Oh, okay, Grizzly, if you got to go, good seeing you.
See you later, Chris.
All right, take care, guys. Got another show. Y'all have fun. Godspeed. Bye-bye.
We'll probably just stay on for just a few more minutes ourselves, and then we'll probably end this. But basically, and the stupid reason was, it was because some girl did not want to talk to him. But it was actually him that was kind of pressuring him, pressuring her to begin with. So it was kind of bad all from the start. And this guy, he got mad. He wrote on Facebook that he was going to do this. And of course, by the time that he got to the school, the police were already waiting for him. So they arrested him right on the spot. And, these were very serious charges. And here's the thing. He was, even though he was still a student, he was 19 years old. So, he was already an adult. However, even if he was still under 18, if this is a federal crime, and here's the thing. I mean, I don't know what it's like out in the UK, but again, states vary. But when it comes to those serious crimes, you don't even have to be 18 or 21 to get convicted and have a serious sentence on you. Like here in Illinois, at 13 or 14 years old, you can be charged as an adult by the state of Illinois for a crime like that. So it wouldn't have mattered how old he was. So
I know it used to be over here. You could commit a crime as a child.
Yeah.
But you would then be resentenced once you got to 18.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you then became an adult, it was, well, you've been given this sentence, so you'll serve your time then. I don't know how the system's changed because I'm a good boy.
Yeah.
And I don't go around committing crimes, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, for most states nowadays, they've been lowering it now to 13 or 14 because I know some people may think that's a little bit on the harsh side, but if it's a federal crime, I think it's understandable because you don't have to be 18 or 21 to prove that you're a very dangerous individual. Yeah. So it does make sense in a way. And what his original sentence was, because it was a felony, he was going to be sentenced originally to 10 to 15 years in the state penitentiary for a crime like that. But after they did some evidence and they did find explosives at his house, and I'm still not really sure even to this day how they lowered it down, because they found them at his house, which were illegal to keep to begin with.
Yeah.
They lowered it down basically to a misdemeanor instead of a felony, which as a result, there was never a real attempted murder trial in 2010. And even though he was already technically an adult, there was almost like they were kind of treating it like a juvenile case. So therefore, there was never an attempted murder trial because he was only 19 years old. The only, as I can recall, the only thing that the state of Illinois could do was to basically put him on probation for a minimum of 2 years and hold them and keep him in their custody up until his 21st birthday. And at that point, he was going to be released. So essentially, he would have ended up serving, no more than 2 years for that type of crime. And even though he was already technically an adult, still, they said once he was released, those records would be sealed. And no one would know that he committed this type of crime. However, and like I said, he's still kind of causing trouble out there to this day. We actually did at one point call the police on him a few months back because of a recent crime. I don't want to get into too many details, but he, along with a friend of his, sounded like they were going to commit some type of cruelty towards an animal. And that got us really, really concerned. So we called the police and they came up to them and they told them that, if we catch you guys harming this animal, you will do prison time. And since considering many years have passed, obviously we couldn't get him arrested because he never proceeded with the act. But obviously, considering how many years have passed, what myself and others were able to do was to try to really scare him off and give him that reminder that now that he's in his 30s, that if he committed a crime like this, that he would be eventually transferred to our adult facility. But so far, I think we gave him quite a scare. But he would have probably also done some of that communities. I honestly think he should have done some of that community service when he delivered that threat to us, almost 15 years ago now. So, but he was put on probation as a result.
Yeah, I think sometimes the judicial system, no matter what country it is, they seem to be a lot harsher with a smaller crime. You can commit a small crime and get quite a harsh punishment, and yet you can commit a really bad crime and get something really silly.
And that was kind of a little bit of unsatisfied in this case with this guy, because like I said, this was someone who used to be a friend of mine, and I even when he got off this probation, I even tried helping this guy out. I was actually trying to kind of help in his rehabilitation. Unfortunately, there was just not, he was kind of going back to his old ways, and I knew that there was nothing else I could do. He just didn't want that help. So, our major concern was what's going to happen when he's officially released off probation. I mean, he basically described himself in a way like that, oh, I don't need the help, I can handle this myself, that kind of thing. And eventually, you know, even if you're still trying your best, eventually you just have to realize that there's just not much you can do about it. Eventually, the choice is up to them then.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because you do get a lot of people where they go into prison and they just come out and commit a crime again, just to end up going straight back in again. And a lot of people, they seem to sort of, I don't know, hobbyist criminals is the only way you can class it. They do it as a hobby because they know that they'll end up back in prison again, being cared for by the state. They haven't got to worry about anything. They, you know, the everyday worries of life that we get outside, in the outside world, we've got that constantly. Once they're inside, they haven't got anything to worry about. So as soon as they come out, they're like, oh, hang on a minute. I've now going to have to look out for a job. I've got to earn money. I've got to pay bills. Whereas inside prison, I don't have to do any of that. So they go straight back out, commit a crime, and they go, oh, you know, you've done this with only 2 weeks of being released, straight back in and finish off your sentence.
Yeah, I mean,
and they end up straight back in again.
I can even think of someone not necessarily looking for who was looking for those kind of intentions, but down in Louisiana, there's the Louisiana State Penitentiary. As of 2023, we have one of the longest serving inmates, like, who's still in prison to this day. He was originally convicted back in, again, this was originally, I think, back in the 50s that he committed this crime. And, you know, they had interviewed, I think he was in prison for a murder. And now to basically just specify exactly, it was a murder that they did because obviously, since this was the segregated South, it was a black inmate, but it was not because of, you know, racial segregation. They did find evidence that this guy actually committed this murder. So it was one of the few times that an inmate, regardless of race, was you know, correctively sentenced, you know, because his crime was so gruesome back then. He's still alive today, still in prison. He had been interviewed, you know, by the local news companies asking, you know, what's going to happen if they ever do release you, because he said he's been in prison in the Ellis Louisiana State Penitentiary all his life. They asked him, saying, if the state of Louisiana ever releases you, where do you think you're going to go? You know, like, do you have any ideas? And he just simply went, I've been here all my life. I don't know where I'm going to go if I get released. I could be saying this incorrectly, but I think he said something along the lines of, I might as well just commit another crime to just spend here, because the guy's in his late 70s, early 80s now. And considering that he committed this murder back in the 50s, even if he had people that still cared for him and was still kind of connecting with them, the sad part is probably most of those people are probably dead, of course, now. So he might think that committing another crime would probably be the right thing to do. At least he had a roof over his head, and he would need a place to stay. And even though his murder was committed almost 7 decades earlier, knowing that most jobs would probably not hire a murderer, find a place to stay, he probably might as well commit another crime, because, you know, he has nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and he, like you say, he spent so many years in prison. The prison life and the prison lifestyle is going to be the only lifestyle he knows. I mean, and as soon as he comes out, it's going to be a culture shock for him. He's got all the bills to pay. He's got to find a roof over his head. He'd be lucky to find a job, so he would have to beg on the streets or find money from somewhere. And the only way he's going to find money from somewhere to pay those bills is by committing other crimes.
Exactly.
So he will keep within that criminal system, and the chances are he'll get caught and put straight back into jail again. And so his answer is probably quite honest and true.
Well, and not to mention, if you think about it, if he committed this crime when he was still a free person back in the 50s, and here we are now in 2023, you know, now almost 70 years later, and we see this, in fact, again, we see this in films like Shawshank Redemption with the character Brooks, who served most of his life in prison. When he got out, not only did he have all these responsibilities now as a free person, but he also noticed, and would like write, if you will, that the entire world has changed. You know, there's cars, there's much more buildings now, there's hell of a lot more people. Bills are certainly probably far more expensive to pay compared to what it was from his era. And that's kind of the same thing with this real inmate, is that if you look at someone who was like, you know, convicted back in the 50s and you come out in the 2020s, you'll notice it's a completely different world. Technology changed, and you're not going to be really used to that type of lifestyle. I mean, yes, of course, inmates who serve life sentences may notice a few changes here and there in the prison system itself, but for the most part, it's usually, when you're in prison, it's pretty much the same kind of lifestyle. It's essentially a time capsule in itself. So you release someone who served like 50 or 60 years of their life in prison, and they come out to a world that they sure as hell did not remember when they were prior to their convictions. That's also another thing that's going to cause people to recommit a crime, thinking, oh, this is a different world. I'm not ready for this. I got to go back to where I was. You know, I want to go back to my time capsule.
But it's like I said, it's a culture shock. You spend 50 years in jail, you can imagine that when you get released from jail and you could walk to somewhere, like go off into a McDonald's restaurant, and you look at the price board and go, oh my word, the last time I came into a McDonald's, a hamburger was only 69 cents.
Oh, like
and now look at it.
Now it's like $3 to $5.
39 cents. What's going on? You know, how come the prices have gone up so much?
And Samantha makes a good point. You know, he would feel extremely isolated in a world he knows nothing about.
Like you say, things would have changed. There'd have been more people. The cars would look completely different. I mean, okay, there would be television inside the prisons. So we might have a rough idea of some things that have changed, but things in general that you would see on the outside world that may not have been broadcast or seen on the TV screen inside the prison. He's going to go out there and go, oh my word.
Even a typical cell phone or an iPhone that we use, you know, again, someone who committed a crime back in the 50s, there were no cell phones at that time. There may have been walkie-talkies.
Like, what's that?
Yeah, they'll look at, they're basically primitive still in their years. They're going to be asking like a whole bunch of questions.
Even someone that was born in the put in prison in the 80s would come out now and go, why on earth is your phone that small?
Exactly.
Because even mobile phones in the 80s were like great big bricks.
They were like boxes.
You know, like that. Now all of a sudden they're on your watches. And
they also used to be so expensive. I mean, they would be that kind of thing where back then people would say you would have to be extremely rich to have one of these. When did all of a sudden everybody have these things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, over here now, the company that used to run all the landline telephones have now said that they're not going to be doing landline telephones for new customers.
Right.
They're actually getting rid of landline phones, because now everybody has mobile phones with all you can eat data. So unlimited data, unlimited text messages, and unlimited calls. The main company is now looking at it and going, is there any need for landlines anymore? Because nobody's using them.
Exactly.
And they did the same with phone boxes. The countryside and towns and villages used to be scattered with phone boxes. But because of mobile phones being used now and becoming so popular, they've just turned around and said, what's the point of having a phone box anymore?
Right.
So they just started getting rid of them.
I'm actually looking at, because I told you about the inmate, I mean, from Illinois, the one who was one of our longest serving inmates. I'm just gonna read this, and I think after this we're probably gonna end this because we do have to get off eventually. But one of our longest serving inmates we've ever had was a man by the name of Richard Honeck, and he was an American murderer who served one of the longest custodial sentences ever to terminate in a prisoner's release in American criminal history. Before he was ever sentenced to prison, he was originally a telegraph operator and son of a wealthy dealer. This was back in the 1880s and 90s. And he was 20 years old when he was arrested in Chicago in September of 1899 for the murder of Walter F. Kohler. he and another man, Herman Hunhazen, had gone to Kohler's room armed with an 8-inch Bowie knife, a 16-inch Bowie knife, a silver-plated case knife, a 44 caliber revolver, a 38 caliber revolver, a 22 caliber revolver. They had a lot of weapons, a club, and 2 belts of cartridges. They also carried a getaway kit consisting of 2 satchels filled with dime novels, obscene etchings, and clothes from which the names had been cut. So these guys had like everything. Kohler, who was later found by the police sitting in a chair, was stabbed in the back, had testified for the prosecution some years earlier when Honeck and Hunhazen were charged with the setting of a number of fires in their hometown of Hermann, Missouri. According to a confession made by Hunhazen, the 2 men had sworn revenge and planned Kohler's murder in considerable detail. Honeck, Hunhazen said, had stabbed the dead man with the 8-inch Bowie knife, which was discovered smeared with coagulated blood. So, as a result of that crime, Honeck was sentenced to life in prison. And he spent his first years of his sentence, and this was still at a time when Illinois had the death penalty. So he was lucky that he got life imprisonment instead of the death penalty. And he spent the first years of his sentence, believe it or not, in Joliet Prison, which of course is now a popular prison now for because it's said to be extremely haunted and it allows investigations. In 1912, however, he stabbed the assistant warden with a hand-crafted knife, or shank, in other words.
Yeah.
He served 20 days in solitary confinement for that infraction and was shackled with a ball and chain for 6 months, but had a clean record after moving to Southern Illinois Penitentiary, which is now known as Menard Correctional Center. It's still in operation today, where he worked for 35 years in the prison bakery. But it kind of made him notorious, though, surprisingly, because in the decades between his conviction and the time his case came to public notice again in August of 1963, Honeck received 1 letter, a 4-line note from his brother in 1904, and 2 visitors, a friend in 1904 and a newspaper reporter in 1963. And again, I think his sentence did actually serve as the inspiration for the character Brooks in Shawshank Redemption, because Associated Press reporter Bob Poos brought attention to Honeck's case in 1963 after seeing reference to it in the Menard prison newspaper. In a follow-up newspaper, Poos noted that the aged murderer had subsequently received a mailbag of 2,000 letters, including a proposal of marriage from a woman in Germany, offers of employment, and gifts of money in sums ranging from $5 down to 25 cents. Honeck, who was permitted under prison rules to answer 1 letter per week, observed, "It'll take a long time to deal with these." And one of the last things that he said was, again, similar to Brooks and Shawshank, he says, "I guess I'd have to be pretty careful if I got parole," the 84-year-old prisoner concluded when interviewed by Poos. "There must be an awful lot of traffic now and people compared with what I remember." And the craziest thing was, he was eventually released on December 20th of 1963 upon the intervention of his niece, Clara Orth. And the 2 eventually settled in Sutherland, Oregon. In 1971, he was admitted to a Roseburg nursing home where he spent the last 5 years of his life. He died in December of 1976 at the age of 97. So imagine again how he must have felt when he got released.
Yeah.
And honestly, but in this case, the only thing that pretty much prevented him from going back to prison was because of his niece.
Yeah, it's I think it's a bit weird, isn't it, how the judicial system works in such a way that someone can commit a crime, and with you guys in the States, each state is responsible for how a criminal is so either they've been turned They've been turned into defibrillators, which you have to use. You have to phone a phone number to get the code to get access to the defibrillator.
Yeah, exactly.
So you found someone, you can imagine this now, you found someone who's having a heart attack. Okay, their heart needs restarting. The defibrillator is the only way you're going to do it. But you've got to phone the NHS or the National Health Service for the code to get into the box to take out the defibrillator to use it on this person who was by this time probably dead.
Exactly.
And unless they've put them in phone boxes, unless you're in Colchester, and then they've put them outside restaurants, because when you look at the menu and see the price, you're going to need a defibrillator.
Right.
Because of the shock. You're going to be like, oh my God, no, that's it, defibrillator. But yeah, I mean, obviously in the States, each state is responsible for their own judicial system and the rules. So you've got some states there where you've got the death penalty, some that don't. Some will be more harsher with certain crimes than others. Over here, the judicial system is set up in a way to punish the criminal, but it's down to the judge to give the sentence. And they will look at a certain category and go, well, you've committed this crime, and this crime has a maximum of this sentence. But you've said this and you've said that, so I'm only going to give you 3/4 of that sentence.
Right.
But then you've done this as well, so you will run this. But then they've got this wonderful word, consecutively.
Yep. And that's usually the worst thing you would probably want to hear then.
I hate, because I've witnessed it myself where somebody has been responsible for committing about 15 criminal acts and they've been given one sentence. But each of these criminal acts, if they were put on one after the other, would have massed to about 40 years in prison. But they went, no, to run consecutively, and you'll be able to have parole within 8 years.
Right.
That is not teaching, that's not punishing a criminal. That's giving that criminal an easy life for the next 8 years.
Well, that's kind of the same thing too, even like when I brought up about this former friend of mine who committed, because this was attempted murder. I mean, I could tell you right now, I mean, even though that it got lowered down to a misdemeanor, had he been charged as a felon for that type of crime, right now he shouldn't even be out in society. He wasn't supposed to get out until 2025. He's not even supposed to be out here right now.
Yeah. And it's things like good behavior.
Yeah.
Oh, while you've been in prison, you've been such a good boy. You've sat down, you've studied for this course, and you've done this and you've done that. You've helped out in the bakery. You've helped out in the library. That, to me, is mollycoddling.
Yeah.
The criminal, and to allow them to go through all that and then go, well, you've been so good, we're going to let you out early. No, you've committed a crime. That's where you should be. If the judge has turned around and said you're going to serve 20 years in jail, that's the term you serve.
Right.
Not a day less.
Well, and not to mention
if you've committed an act while you're serving that term, then it can be extended. But you will not serve any less than what the judge has given you. And that should be that.
Well, and I also think too, I guess it also would probably depend on the inmate too. I mean, I also would not think it would be fair too even if they did have good behavior, but they still don't show exact remorse or regret for the crime that they committed. I mean, it's one thing if they start realizing that they have committed a terrible thing and they actually tried to, let's say, for example, if they murdered someone, they wanted to talk to the family of the deceased head on and acknowledge what they done was wrong. Like there's a possibility thinking, okay, well, if he's served this many years and stuff and he realizes it, maybe, just maybe. But if they're just saying that just for show and they really don't care, then that person should not be released then, because it's obvious that they still haven't acknowledged the severity of what they've done to their families and stuff. So, I mean, even still to this day, I'd still like to believe that our prison system still does their absolute best to rehabilitate these inmates and eventually you get them to understand what they've done and eventually give them the chance to eventually get out and be part of society. But unfortunately, like I said, in the case with this former friend of mine, the reality is you just can't change and help everybody. And the only option then is to keep them behind bars till whoever knows when. It could be
I think
the end of their lives.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the majority do, the majority of prisons do help the inmates. And I would say that there is a majority of inmates that come out and actually get on with life.
Yeah.
The way they should be. So I think the prisons are doing their best. But the problem then is there's so many people that are ending up in prison in the first place that the prisons are then getting inundated with criminals. There's so many prisoners, they're lacking the funding. And so they need to then recreate the judicial system to accommodate these prisoners so that there is a way around things.
Exactly.
And I think, sometimes when you've got these prisoners that are able to sit there in their cells and play on a PlayStation 5, he's given them too much of an easy life. They need to be reminded of the reason why they're in that prison in the first place.
Right.
I don't think bars on the window is enough of a reminder to that person that they've committed a crime.
Well, and honestly, it's funny you brought that up because, again, when I was on my trip to Colorado, we actually passed by. Colorado is actually home to the most secure prison facility in the entire country. It's I know I talked about on the show previously. It's the ADX Supermax, which is located in the outside the city of Florence, Colorado.
Sounds like a cinema.
Yeah, it kind of is, but I mean, just by the name of it. But the actual prison itself, it's more of a prison that is for inmates that are extremely dangerous, like even for a maximum security prison. And the Supermax basically is the prison for, terrorists or some serial killers, not really most of them.
Yeah.
And also you have like criminal leaders or gang leaders that are there, or inmates that have committed a very brutal crime in the prison system itself, even in a maximum security prison. So essentially any of those type of titles, those inmates essentially have earned the rights to go to the Supermax. And the prison cell itself is nothing like you would see in a normal prison. It sure as hell doesn't have like the bars behind windows or anything like that. It's nothing more than just a small room, and you got a bed, a table, and a stool, which are all made out of poured concrete. So it's especially the bed, it's very uncomfortable. You are sometimes given a mat if you show some good behavior, but even with the mat,
you've been a good boy. Here's a mattress.
No, I'm talking about like one of those flat mats. I mean, it's not like one of those like thick ones.
Oh, like the yoga mats.
Yeah, like a yoga mat, almost exactly.
You might be lucky and get a pillow in a couple of years' time.
Well, and the only time, and they also give you something what's known as far as like if it gets cold, they give you what's known as a suicide blanket. If people don't know, a suicide blanket is a green blanket especially designed so you cannot kill yourself. You cannot make knots. You cannot hang yourself with it. So and then also the only other thing that they have in the cells is they have a small television, which is, even though it seems outdated, it's a black and white TV that shows recreational, educational, religious programming. And the window itself is nothing more than just a slit. And you could barely see anything out of it because it's designed to make an escape virtually impossible.
Yeah. I mean, so they're a bit like the medieval murder holes, just slits in the wall, just enough to let a bit of light in.
I mean, literally, like the only thing that you could literally see out of the window is nothing more than just the roof and the sky. And that's because the exact goal is not only to try to really incarcerate these people, but also to really prevent them from knowing their exact location. Because again, if inmates try to make an escape, it would be impossible to know exactly where they are. And whenever they are, admitted out of their cells, they are escorted by a minimum of 6 officers, and they're completely chained up too. So, and some inmates are even lucky enough. I mean, contact with the outside world is strictly prohibited. I mean, it's the only thing that some inmates may get is like 2 phone calls a month, and that's it. They also have to eat in their own cells. Although, again, if they show some good behavior, they are allowed and permitted to be put into a shared dining room, but they cannot speak to each other. So it's the strictest prison facility. So that's like, in my opinion, probably not necessarily the worst, but the best punishment, if you will, for inmates that are just extremely violent and just are too dangerous for even a normal maximum security prison.
The problem is that although it's a maximum security prison, it's a maximum security prison for the worst criminals possible.
You always hear like the worst of the worst. This is basically designed to be for the worst of the worst of the worst, if you will.
If you were to have that sort of prison for somebody that was responsible maybe for stealing a box of cornflakes from a supermarket, you certainly wouldn't want to do that again, would you, if you're going to end up in a prison like that for stealing a box of cornflakes? But then you get these people that would turn around and go, well, don't you think that's a bit draconian to lock someone up in a prison like that for theft? But you think yourself lucky when in countries like Saudi Arabia, if you get caught stealing, it's goodbye hand.
Yeah, they cut your hands off.
You've got a lot of, you've got a lot to be thankful for when all you're going to be done is put in a cell rather than lose your hand.
Well, and that's why in the case with the Supermax, they only put certain inmates that deserve to go to such a facility. And the one thing, actually, one of the former wardens who once worked there said, one of the things that I think really bothers a lot of inmates, like especially because most of these inmates are never getting out. The one thing that usually traumatizes and bother these inmates when they go to this facility is that, you think of a state like Colorado, it's the Rocky Mountain state. So there's, when you're being escorted to this prison facility, as you're walking, you're seeing the beauty of the Rocky Mountains. When you went inside the prison facility, when you went inside the facility, whether you know it or not, that's the last time you're ever going to truly see the outside world. So it's really that kind of message that you're screwed now.
you'd be turning around to the prisoner and going, right, the door's going to close now. Kiss goodbye to that view because you're never going to see it again.
You start wishing that you're in a normal maximum security prison again because, it's probably, one person once called it a high-tech prison, version of hell. Because again, you have very few privileges. It's definitely not a place anybody should be. Although there is one inmate, however, that will be released later this year in November. He was, I don't remember who his name was, but he had served a 23-year prison sentence because he was a former CIA employee, and he had actually been working undercover with the Russians. And which definitely, even back in the late 90s, was a major offense. So he ended up serving a sentence, and believe it or not, he's going to be one of the very few inmates that will be paroled and will be leaving the facility and will be living to tell about it.
Yeah, he's one of the inmates that is actually going to see the outside world.
He's one of the very few, not very many inmates get that privilege, if you will. So he will be back out, and hopefully, I'm hoping that once he gets out, he really, truly learned his lesson for what he did.
He'll probably go straight back in when he sees how much a Big Mac is and the size of mobile phones and how many people there are and what the cars have turned into. He'll go, I'm back in. Sod this, I'm off.
Glad I was able to help out, Smith. Hope he doesn't go to Russia.
You don't want to go there at the moment.
Yeah.
They'll probably put him in prison there as well. We'll probably be back in the same style prison as well.
It could even be worse. You never know.
Well,
all right. Well, it's been almost 2 hours, so I think it's probably time that we should probably.
That's. I think we were scheduled to finish around now anyway. So
yeah,
we've done pretty well because I didn't expect us to last this long.
I honestly didn't either. I mean, I know we were still talking about. I mean, we were originally talking about Jill Dando, but it's always fascinating when sometimes we talk about other similar crimes and stuff involved in the subject. So it's fascinating either way.
Yeah, I mean, it is supposed to be a crime show, so
exactly.
We've kept on subject. Okay, we were starting off with Jill Dando, but as we were saying with Lois earlier on, that you can only go so far, and we covered most of it last week. It was only the new evidence that we hadn't covered this week. So it would have been a case of we got that far. What do we do after that? And we've managed to cover it by going on to a different subject within crime. We've actually turned it into crime and punishment.
Well, and if you think about it too, I mean, even if we went off topic, maybe not off topic, but off the particular subject, that doesn't mean that we will eventually talk about it again. Because like you said, there's always going to be eventually new evidence that will turn up, new stories, and
Definitely.
I'm sure we will talk about it, maybe not next week, but I'm sure in a future episode, we may eventually have a part 3, and then by then we'll have a lot more to talk about in that case. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could find out. I mean, come Christmas time, we might find out that the guy that worked for the CIA got released from prison. He made the mistake of going on holiday somewhere, and the Russians were sitting there waiting for him.
Exactly.
You never know.
It's possibly there. He would make a good candidate for the Supermax, especially out because that's crimes against humanity. Because, like I said, that's for inmates who've committed those type of crimes. Maybe not as extreme as what Putin has done, but that's what the Supermax is made for.
Yes.
But I'm not sure exactly what Lois would like to talk about next week. I mean, did she say anything about that or?
No, Lois never said anything to me about what was going to happen next week, but I'm sure once she's feeling better, she will sort something out regards to a subject, and either she'll message us within the presenters group, or she'll post something up online as to what we'll be talking about next week.
So, yeah, we'll talk. We'll definitely talk and see what we're going to talk about for next week's episode, but. Yeah. Because I see here a couple, because I know these names here like Samantha and Carrie. I think I know they've probably seen the show before, but I'm kind of new to these certain people. So
well, Samantha is my director at Truth Beyond Paranormal.
Oh, is that right?
And I shared the live onto my timeline, so Samantha's found us through that. So yeah, there will be a few new faces on there, courtesy of my sharing out. So,
well, just so in case they'd be interested in checking it out, I know, of course, it's going to be later in the UK, but if you guys, for like Samantha, Carrie, for some of the others, I do another show on Thursday nights, at least for here. I do a show called Supernatural Talk, which I'll be doing in just a few hours. That one will be on the Things Network itself. Yep. And we are having a return guest on later tonight. We're having and Wayne, I know you haven't met her like face to face, but she has watched our shows a few times. Kate Frazee.
Yep.
She's actually the one who always admires your accent, as a matter of fact. And the funny thing too is, for those who don't know her, you would start assuming at first that she's from the UK, when back she was. But now she actually lives here in the Chicago area. So we had her on last week. And originally tonight we were going to have it just as an open mic. But we had such a great conversation with Kate that we're going to have her back on for tonight's episode. So although that show we usually go for 2 hours, however, we are only going for an hour this time because Kate said that she does have a visitor coming out around 8 o'clock my time. So this next show will only be running for an hour, and that's going to be 7 o'clock my time, which I think for you guys, looking at the time zone right now, It's probably going to be about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
It's about 2 hours from now. So, 12 a.m. Exactly. Yep. Like Carrie just said, it'll be midnight for you guys. So if you guys are willing to stay up and check it out, we'd always love the support. And then, of course, we'll be back tomorrow afternoon too, or tomorrow evening for you guys for the Frighteners. So I got to figure out. I think we're going to be talking about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to talk about. So it'll be, that's awesome, Samantha. So stick around and also check out some of the other shows we got on both Things Network and Simply Spooky Network.
Yeah.
Oh, and also I got a trailer that I thought I was going to complete before I got on here, but it's probably going to have to wait till tomorrow. So it's for my new series I'm trying to put together called Scary Stories Presented in the Dark.
Which reminds me, you need to send me over those manuscripts.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can't keep reminding you.
We'll talk backstage after we get off.
If anybody is interested, on Saturday, Truth Beyond Paranormal releases their latest episode, which is the feature-length episode of a mill that dates back as early as the 1500s, and quite an investigation it was as well. So that will be airing on the Truth Beyond Paranormal group on Saturday on Facebook and on YouTube.
Awesome.
And then back to me being live again on Sunday night on Spookinori.
If I could just say one thing, if you guys, like for the show that you guys do on Mondays, I mean, if you guys ever are looking for more guests, I would definitely highly recommend Kate, because she's incredible of what she's talked about. She's really been admiring both networks. So I honestly been kind of helping her out, try to get her on as a guest on other shows, because she's just amazing to chat with. So highly recommend her at some point for when you and Mark do your show. I don't know if you guys really have ever had guests on your show on the Monday show, but if you guys ever do, I'd highly recommend her.
We do have guests on. Monday we had David Young on, who's an investigator, a UFO investigator from Canvey Island in Essex, and he sort of knows quite a lot about the Rendlesham Forest incident. He has spoken to Colonel Holt and a few of the other witnesses from the incident, so he is quite knowledgeable in the subject. And we actually had a chat with him. So
unfortunately had one time, poor guys.
So we do have guests on every once in a while when we've decided not to just talk random stuff. It's pretty good.
One final announcement I'll make too, and you know what, I'm actually kind of make it not necessarily a separate announcement, but Carrie, Samantha, for those who want to see Supernatural talk, in case you guys want to know who's all part of this one, it's ran by not only myself, but also Jeremy York, who's the actual runner and owner of Things Network, along with Adrian and Eileen. But the other announcement I just want to make, we don't have a specific date yet, and Wayne, I actually spoke about it with you last night, along with everybody else. We have a new show on Things Network that's called Horror Fiction Live. And although it's, despite the title, it is also for the paranormal too. It is our first ever show from Asia, or Bangladesh to be exact. And the guy who runs it, the gentleman, his name's Walker, along with his co-host Waylem, if I'm saying that correctly. And he is currently looking for new guests, particularly the show hosts throughout these different networks. And at some point I've been a guest myself on it, and he is looking to expand to other show hosts. So we are going to be coming on his show at some point. I know it's going to be on a Sunday, but I just don't know exactly which Sunday. But eventually we will be going on as guests. And I honestly think this is definitely going to be a great opportunity because, Wayne, for you being in the UK, or in England, or in this case, Lois being in Scotland, this will really help expand out, trying to get a show, because he's really trying to build an audience. And I'm actually trying to help him out with it. So we are going to be on an episode real soon. And it is going to be a show, believe it or not, that one of the things he likes doing is telling certain scary stories. So Wayne, obviously, I know you're quite an expert with stories too. So bringing you on would definitely be awesome because we all would have a story to tell.
Oh, yes.
But once I get more details on it, I'll let everybody know when we're going to be on it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So I can't wait. But anyways, it's now been exactly 2 hours. So,
yes.
Thank you guys all. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. I know we kind of changed stuff, but this was definitely a very interesting show regardless. And it's like maybe too scary for you. Well, you might want to at least give it a shot. So you never know.
But if they go on Wayne Seaton Presents Spookinori page or the Wayne Seaton Presents Spookinori group on a Sunday evening from 9:30 onwards, you will get to listen to a nice, calm, scary story.
Exactly. But anyways, thank you guys all so much. I'll see some of you guys in a few hours on Supernatural Talk. Of course, hopefully some of you guys will be back on tomorrow afternoon/evening for the Frighteners. But until then, you guys all have a great night.
And Lois, get well soon.
Yeah, and Lois, definitely get well soon. A lot of us have kind of been getting sick. I was sick recently, but I'm a lot better now. So, yes, hopefully Lois will get sick. Get sick
soon.
Get well soon, Lois, and hopefully you'll be back on for Frighteners tomorrow. So, guys, all have a great night.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.